All right.
I think we're ready.
Awesome.
Hello, my name is Melanie Taylor Coombs. I'm the Adult Services Supervisor at MacArthur Library, and I am going to turn things over to my counterpart here who is on this recording with me.
And I'm Renee Burkett. I'm the Special Collections Librarian and the Archivist at MacArthur Library here in Biddeford. Also, Mike, back to you, Melanie.
So, we usually in October, we celebrate Family History Month. A couple of weeks ago, we got a very interesting question about someone looking for the history of their home. And I think Renee can say the same, we'll reiterate what I say, but we often get people that are looking for the history of their home because they're sure it's haunted. So maybe fits in perfectly with October, but a lot of people want to just know the history, and we actually have a lot of businesses in town that are, they're the places that their business operates used to be a private home, and they're looking for the history, historic photographs. So this question about what is the history of my home is extremely common. So we thought we'd put together this little video for you in honor of Family History Month on how to find the history of your home.
Yep. And at least like if you were to come into the library and ask us, oh, how do I start researching this? This is pretty much the spiel you would get, only you get two of us at the same time instead of maybe one. But this is kind of like, this is our where to start, how to start. So we hope you guys all enjoy this. And let's see, where to start. Melanie, actually, we were trying to think of a building in town that would make sense for us to use an example. And Melanie came up with the really good idea of using the house. It's the York County Head Start building, which was originally a home. And it's gone by a few different names. But the oldest one that we have found it referred to as is the Parson Tracy/Gibbs house. And so we're going to use that building because it's not a private residence. So like it didn't feel too weird looking up the stuff. So we're going to use that historic home as our example home to show you like where we would start and the different kind of resources you can use to try and look up your house or building or whatever.
So Renee has already done a lot of the work for you, but we wanted to just make sure that you can always start with us. We can at least, sometimes people will come in and will say, oh, well, there's all this history that's already been written and here's some information for you. That goes along with a lot of the family history that you do, but also with homes. And so the best place for you to start is at the library and with the biddefordhistory.com site that Renee, our archivist, has put together already for you.
Yep, and that site is just kind of like, it's kind of a hub. And you can also get there just by going to the library's website. If you go to macarthurlibrary.org and then click on local history and genealogy, it'll bring you right there to the site. And that spot has links to our photo catalog. It has links to our newspaper archive, which is really extensive. It has all of the earliest Biddeford newspapers that the library owns, like prior to the 1870s, are all on there, and we add more every year. So that's an excellent place to start. Also, that's there. We have links to the main memory network, which we'll be talking about. Also the library's archives, digitized books, and as well as links to other outside resources.
So one of the first things that we would do when you come into the library is to tell you to, we would obviously help you with this, but there's a lot of great local histories. And so one of them is Folsom, which we consider sort of like the Bible of local history. And since we were searching for the Parson Tracy or Reverend Tracy house, I looked it up in the index and it for sure is in there. So in 1823, Reverend Tracy came from Cambridge to Biddeford. He preached several Sabbaths and was very much to the satisfaction of the local people. And they asked for him to stay for a term of 5 years. In 1824, he agreed to stay and he was ordained. And then he left in 1828. And so there's not a lot of information. That took a little bit more digging for me. But obviously, so now we have identified, yes, Reverend Tracy was here in the 1824, 25 to like 1828. We know he was here. And then, so did he live in this house? How do we find that out? So our work has been done for us. Another local history, the History and Stories of Biddeford, clearly states that the Parson Tracy house, at the corner of Stone and Lincoln Streets, was built in about 1826. It was the first brick house ever built in Biddeford. It was the first occupant was Reverend Tracy, who was at the Second Congregational Church. So we have some clear evidence. So the local histories in this case were definitely very helpful. We're going to talk about the people that lived in the house a little bit too, and I'll touch upon that in a few minutes when we get to that section. But local histories are always a great place to find some information about the people.
Yeah, and Melanie mentioned in there finding the people is using the city directories, and those ones, most of those you're gonna have to come into the library to use. We have them back to 1849, which was the first year that city directory was made for Saco and Biddeford. And some of them have been digitized. We did digitize the very earliest ones during COVID, during lockdown. So we got those online so people could use them from home. So those are there, and you can get those through our ebooks area on the local history website. But the other, can always, if you're away or you can't get into the library, we're usually pretty happy to look into those city directories for you as well. And we'll, send you a copy if we can find the people you're looking for. So that's another really great resource that can tell you who lived in a building, or like if it had multiple uses, like if maybe there was a business or something on the first floor or something like that. So those directories are a wonderful resource, and definitely something to look at.
I went through to figure out, because we're going to be talking about the people and the businesses a little bit later, but so I did go in to see if I could find Mr. Gibbs, who lived there and was a Pepperell person, and he is in there. And it's interesting, like every time I use the city directories, I find another little tidbit that I didn't know was there. So there's sort of like a telephone directory before there were telephones.
Yeah.
And so it would say, like, sometimes it would say where they worked or a little bit of information. So George K. Gibbs is in there for a long time. He resided at Stone Street. But then I also found in some of the other city directories is that little pink section that does a street by street directory. So you can go to Stone Street and see everybody that lived on Stone Street. So they're really helpful in a lot of different ways. And in the I popped up to the 70s to see what business was there. And when we talk about the deeds, I can go into that a little bit more further, but there was definitely a listing that the Sun, Suchi, and Blaze funeral home was at that site, and that the people lived in the building as well. So the city directories give a lot of information.
Yeah, they're really great. Those are definitely, and they're not always easy, because sometimes you might have to flip through page by page to find the house that you're looking for, but that's historical research. I mean, that's why doing history is not easy, because it can be a lot of like painstaking, like page by page work. But when you find that person or that entry, it's very rewarding. So let's see. So maps, that's our next awesome part of the puzzle of discovery. We have some nice maps here in the library. A lot of our oldest ones are maybe copies, or they're framed and on the wall. So you can see them, you can walk in and look at them. And most of our maps tend to be of the downtown, closer to downtown area. So that's one thing to be aware of. But we have quite a few Sanborn maps, which are fire insurance maps that show, they will show what a building, that if, if it was a dwelling, if that had outbuildings, or if it was a business or something like that. They only show the footprint of the building. So that's kind of the most detail you get from those. Like they won't say like who, like if it's a residence, it won't say like who lived there, but it'll give you the address of the home, the footprint, what it looked like, and where it was on the street. So that can be really useful if you can see a building change over time. And that's especially, it's the earliest ones that we have access to for Biddeford, I think, are the 1870s or 1880s. So they don't go back all the way. And then we have those through to the 1940s. Those are 47, I think, is the last year we have for Sanborn Maps. And those we have digital copies and some paper copies, but the digital we have more years digitally than we do on paper, and you can access those in the library. You have to come in the library to use those, but the Sanborn maps are really great for that. For our very old, we have one map that is on the wall and that Melanie also found is on at the Osha Map Library that shows the village.
I'm going to pull it up if I can for
awesome. Yes, and this shows, yes, that's beautiful. And so this map, we have a copy of it hanging on our wall. This is at the Osha Map Library. So if you can find any, and they have a lot of maps online and they're really great. They're really searchable. They're really accessible. So it's an awesome resource. And this map right here shows you so clearly, I mean, there it is, Parson Tracy, brick. 1823, and then across the street we've got Daniel Stone. It looks like it says Eater, but it can't be that. And then a Major Cobb.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because I love the fact that whoever did this early map drew what the houses look like. So like, if I'm going to hold this up, oh, it's blurred because it's but this is actually the house. You can sort of see it, even though it's kind of blurry. And so they drew it to look like the house. And this covers, I love the fact that we can get in and really see what's happening here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because it was, the early records say that there was a little brook, and you can see that the brook falls. There's this little brook that goes along this house line, and that this was probably the Barren Lane rather than Stone Street at that time, but was probably later named Stone Street.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And you have like, and this map in particular is kind of the oldest one that I have seen that shows like downtown buildings, and it gives you a real sense of like that really early, like pre-mill Biddeford. It was a really traditional kind of like colonial looking town, like very different from like what we see today. But it's just really fascinating. You can see on the map, you can see the bog, and oh, Benjamin Hooper.
Yeah, we were just talking about
we were just talking about him. He fought in the Revolutionary War. Oh, look, Melanie, it's a coon.
It's a coon. Wow, I'm probably related to them, sort of.
It's awesome.
So I love this map so much, and I'm glad that it's online, because we were talking about this. I take pictures with my phone and then zoom them up so that I can see where things are, but it's super easy to use it in the Osha Map Library.
Yeah.
And I like those maps that they must have come from the giant map that we have on the wall. And they were broken into those little yellow county books that have also names of people and where they lived, but they're later. Those are like usually 1870s period.
Yeah, that one. And the one on the wall that she's talking about is the county map. It's York County. And I believe those are also online. And those you can see, date from about they're like 1860s, because they show Biddeford's first mayor, Daniel Soames. His house is one of the houses like on there. So that really gives you like a sense of, and that's still, kind of just before the mills got huge. So it was still like they were here, and they were growing fast, but it was still like right at that cusp of change. So it's really another great sheet. And that one is nice because it shows the whole town. So it goes all the way down. It goes down Pool Road. You can see Biddeford Pool in that area. And that, you know, it's a map where the homes are shown. They're kind of just like little squares though. So you don't have like this full, drawing of kind of like the sense of like what was there. But at least like it, again, it does have that more detailed information though, to see like, you can count how many homes are on the road, which is really great. But yeah, the maps are a wonderful way to kind of like get your head around what was where. Again, it is a tough thing though, where we have like a few early maps, and then a lot of the downtown area, but not so much of like the rest of town. We have like topography maps, but those don't really show homes. Those don't show like homes or dwellings at all. So on the map side of things, it's definitely worth kind of opening up your search, maybe going to Osha Map Library, Maine Historical Society, see if there are things up. And then Melanie also included what was the other thing I was thinking? Well, Maine Historical Society is nice because it includes libraries and archives from all over the state, and including like, Dyer Library and Saco Museum put stuff on there. So like if they have something useful, you can see a lot of stuff there, which is awesome. And then, other kind of like local places that cross over. The Mills Museum will put stuff on there. Biddeford Historical Society has stuff there. So it's nice because you can kind of cross search a lot of different places on that site. So that's definitely those two places are really great to look for maps.
Yeah, I kind of love the maps.
Yeah,
It's like
they're
one of my
awesome
favorite things. And it's really helpful for genealogy too, because there are times that you're looking for a family name and you're trying to make those connections. And sometimes you find out that, this person married the girl next door, literally the girl next door kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to look at them and kind of figure out where people were living at the time.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like, and that kind of brings us to historic photos, which we are so lucky here to have a great collection of historic images. And so we have on our local history catalog, we have, I think, like 6,000+ images up there at this point. And we've got over 600 up on Maine Memory Network. And you can search by like a street name. That tends to be a good way to look. Simpler is better when you're searching the local history catalog for photos. If you type a lot of stuff into the line, you'll often get a lot more material than really you want to have to sift through, because there's so much stuff on there. If you get 3,000 hits, that can be overwhelming. So say you're searching, so this one is Stone Street. It's the Tracy-Gibbs house. So if you do, I would do a search of either Tracy or Gibbs, or I don't know, Melanie, if you want to give me, let's see.
Yeah, I can or I can, oh yeah, okay, there we go.
Let's see. Oh, I can control your screen. That's super weird.
Oh, that is very cool. You can see that I was looking up rock candy the other day for a patron. I'm glad I didn't have anything weird up there.
So here we are at the local history and genealogy site, and this will bring you to the local history catalog. This is so weird. I cannot believe I'm on your computer right now.
This is so
Technology freaks me out. So let's see. So I'm gonna try searching just by Tracy, and we'll see what that picks up. I'm not sure if it's gonna pick up under Tracy or Gibbs or Stone. Let's see.
I think I used Tracy and I did find it.
And it did pop up. Let's see.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah. So so here's an example of some of the stuff that will come up. You'll have images. You can click on anything we have in our photo catalog. Is there for folks to use, enjoy, save, download. If it's for personal use, if you're just using it for your research and stuff, like, we welcome that use, and that's what it's there for. So here is, a great picture of this house, and it really matches like the picture on the map, right? Just like, check out, the chimneys are just great. So here is a picture, and you can right click on it and you can save this image. So you can like save it to your computer, whatever. And this one here, so this gives a little bit of information that was included with the image. So you can see it's from 1953. Not every house has this much information. Like, this is definitely one of those unique things where it's a really well-known historic home. So people have done research and talked about it before. Another house, say I look up, I know we have, let's see. Oh, wait, no. Here, I'm just trying to give you an example of what most records will look like. So here's some pictures. I knew off the top of my head we have a bunch of pictures of Graham Street. So I just plugged in Graham. This is kind of more typical for what folks are going to see in here. It just says homes on Graham Street, Biddeford, 1955. And that's it. So, but I think a lot of folks will recognize these houses. It's right kind of across the street from Woodlawn Cemetery, and they're all still there. But so for the most part, these pictures are here. By searching by street is usually the best way to get there, rather than by like a personal name, unless it's a well-known historic home like the Tracy-Gibbs house, or the Tuck house, which is the blue place on the corner of Jefferson and Adams. Those kind of homes you can find by a name, but mostly, like, if you're searching for your house, check with the by street first. And like I did, I just plugged in Graham. Like, don't bother adding street or anything like that, because that's just gonna give you every single record that has the word street in it. So you can definitely search that way, and then you end up, you might end up looking through a lot more pictures to find what you're looking for. And also, the other recommendation I have for looking for house pictures is, like this one, for example. You can see in the background there's some other houses and a tenement. Also search for the streets like around your home, because maybe we don't have a picture of Crescent Street, but maybe we do have a picture of South Street, and that shows the backside of a property. So if you have other streets around your home, it's worth looking up each of those streets, because there might be a surprise view of your home that isn't necessarily that wouldn't automatically come up under that area, if that makes sense.
Totally, you know, and I have to say, I've learned a lot from you. We've been working together several years now, and I've learned a lot from Renee, because I remember we were looking for the history of something and you said, check under parades, because there was the series of parade shots that had a lot of, I can't remember which street it was, but Main Street or whatever. And so those had some really interesting shots that we might not have seen if we hadn't been thinking that route. So please reach out to us if there's something that comes up.
because we might be able to think of like some kind of like weirdo way to search it that actually like makes it come up. So that's definitely like something that's great. And so I mean that's like so that's our local history catalog. I mean, there's a ton of stuff on there, and it's all there to, you know, you're welcome to use it. There's also, again, Main Memory Network. Let's see.
I'm glad you're showing that, because this is for those of you who don't know what the Main Memory Network is it was an effort, probably close to 20 years ago now, because I think it was 2007-ish, to really start, you know, documenting in an online format Maine's history. And so it's something that's an ongoing museum quality, you know, it's just a really fabulous site. And this image is actually the image that you found of the Rev Tracy house is in there as well.
Yeah, and what's nice about it is like as I was saying before, it's not just like it's everybody in the state is able to add stuff to it. So, you know, people in surrounding communities or Maine Historical Society and stuff like that will have things on there too. So if we don't have it in our library, maybe someone else does, and maybe it's on there. So it's great. You know, I just plugged in Biddeford and it came up with 998 hits, you know, so and that's gonna give you an awful lot of stuff to look at, which is awesome. And the Main Memory is also very good at, like, you're able to share that stuff and download it and all that stuff and use it for personal use. So it's really useful. And Melanie had also mentioned that you know, Library of Congress has a ton of stuff on there as well. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I definitely forget that they have the Prince division, but it's a huge amount of material and it's all available for free for us to use. We already paid for it, so so it's great. And
it was fun looking at those. They have a collection called Panoramic Prints. And so I was looking at like Maine panoramic, and it would be like warships during world, you know, like these huge, for some reason there was a lot of battleships, and I would type in Maine and I would get the ship, the Maine. But it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's really great. So that's another here, I'm giving up remote control, so you have your computer back.
Okay.
So yeah, like, I mean, definitely look at our place, but Main Memory and Library of Congress are great places to search as well.
And I don't know if you can see my screen right now. I wasn't going to get into this, but I'll do it very quickly. So can you see it right now? I'm in the card. Okay, so I'm in Ancestry, and in terms of pictures, Ancestry actually has, it wasn't working the other day, so hopefully it'll work. I'll just go in, like, pick the United States and then Maine. They've actually expanded yearbooks tremendously in the last couple of years, but it's just another place to see historic postcards, yearbooks, other photos. I kind of like the historic postcards, and we probably have some of these, but like there was one that I was looking at the other day. All right, well, I'll just pull this one up because you can zoom in on them and get a sense of, like, really get a look at, like, here's a mill postcard.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
awesome.
yeah, and so every once in a while, again, like what Renee was saying, sometimes if you kind of broaden your search, you end up with some interesting access to things that you wouldn't have thought that that's the way you were going to find them.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
here's another one of the Pepperell block. This one, I looked at this, I looked at it a few years ago and I was looking at it today, and it doesn't look like they've really expanded this that much. You know, but Ancestry, Family Search, any of those sites are constantly growing. So it's a good idea to just periodically check them and see if there's anything new.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Ancestry right now is that we're offering it for free, at least we hope until December, I believe, is the most recent date. They've kind of been upping it during COVID, but you can access Ancestry from home by using Digital Main Library and then just picking Ancestry through there.
Yeah,
which is
it's amazing. It's a great resource, and it's wonderful to be able to use it.
So yeah, so photos are a great way to just get a look at your house and see what's happening with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so land records. Oh boy.
This one's the hard, this is the hardest part of doing house research.
It totally is.
This is why people this is why you pay a ton of money for like official land research for a house, because it's super hard.
And I'm not going to show you a ton of this because I also don't want to infringe on anybody's rights. Yeah. Essentially, like, I don't want to get into it that much. But so the picture that I was sort of holding up before is which you can't see. Maybe I should unblur myself, but I'm just going to unblur myself for just a second. If I can. Well, you know what? I'm not going to bother. So what this does is, if you go, we'll put all of these links in the comments below this video so that you have the links. But one of the places that you can start, and this is if you're going to start from present day and move backwards, which is, after spending a week with this, trying to figure out and navigate my way through this, I think that would probably be the easiest way to go about it.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a little bit about my land use research for the Rev Tracy house. So the first thing I did was I went to the city's tax assessment records. And the benefit of going there is that you have the last landowner, the last person that owned it, because it gives you who owns it presently, what the tax rate is, and it also gave me a really nice photo of the outside side of the building, and then also the outline of the building's footprint. So those are two key things. Like, what does this look like now? And if we look, you know, we were talking about the maps and the old photos, you could then use this present information to look at the other information that you've gathered to see what has changed in the building over the years.
Yeah.
So then I got the previous owners, which would have been the funeral home, and what year that was. So now we have a couple of pieces of information. We've identified the building, who currently owns it, how much the value of the building is, and then who owned it before. And then we went to phase 2, which would be using the York County Registry of Deeds. And this is where I was like, it was bafflingly hard. And I think Renee's tip about using the minimal amount of information was probably the most helpful thing. Like, I kept trying to search it. And I did not want to give too much information about the previous owners. There's a lot of information in there, deeds, liens. There was actually a death record in there associated with the building, which I'm assuming after somebody passes away, if they're mortgage and they need to prove that the person died. So somehow these were all part of that record in the Registry of Deeds. So there's a lot of information in there, information that I did not expect to find that I did find. So what I did was I went into the house research, and sorry, I'm kind of, all right, let's click that. I'm just going to back out of some of this stuff. All right, so I think it was this one. Okay, so we are now in the Registry of Deeds. And so what I did was I pulled up something that had to do with the library. So here's an easement deed that talks about the library, and this is 1901, a deed of the Pavilion Society dated November 20, 1901 for power to the building. This must have been, it says 1901, but I'm wondering whether it was like later because isn't Dean part?
Yeah, this is like
95.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is like the easement. So there must have been something when we were doing another edition on the building, I think in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so there was more stuff out there, but this gives you some information. So now we could look for deeds from the Pavilion Society because at some point that's what the library was affiliated with.
Right.
And so it's just kind of interesting. I pulled this up so that we wouldn't be really violating any kind of privacy stuff.
But,
so this is
and something that's really, anyone can make a login to use the deeds record. So it's free to search, it's public information. So anyone can go to the York County Register of Deeds and create a little login so you can search the records and come up with this information. So that's the great thing about it. And if you get stuck, they do have the email address up there. You can email them or call up their office, but you can actually do quite a bit if you're patient and kind of keep an open mind about about what you hope to find or whatever.
So the interesting thing was that I found the last owner, the owner before that, and the owner before that, and then it sort of stopped. And so I have a friend that's a land surveyor, and his answer when I was asking him questions about how do we get into deeds and how do we do this is why you pay a land surveyor so much money, because this is often what they're doing is researching these old deeds. And so he said that not every county in the state is the same in terms of what they have online. So for me, I think my next step would have been to physically go to the Registry of Deeds and then look back, because I did have what they call the book and the page number, which would then allow me to search for the exact next document that I needed in my research to go back. So you're going to go back to a certain point around the time that Maine became a state, I would guess. And then you have this other thing that you need to do, which is the really old deeds, the York deeds. We have a copy of them here in the library. I think it's 18 volumes. And I've known that they were there, and I have pointed people in that direction, but I also said, okay, if we're doing this, I need to really familiarize myself with these. And so I was doing that, and I was messing around with those and trying to figure those out. And in my search, I found that Family Search, which is another genealogy site, has digitized those.
Oh, that's great.
And so that was free to make a login for it as well. So that's awesome. And so there was one thing that's probably a bit of a stretch, but we know Reverend Parson was the first guy to own this house, to build this house. And that was a pretty fancy house for Parson, and he actually was sort of really doing the parsonage work in Saco. So why would he build there? So I, just for the heck of it, to figure out how to use these ancient old deed books, I kept putting in western side of Saco River, Biddeford, and just different things to kind of, because the search engine on this was digitized. So it was pretty easy to use. And so I was going through it, and there was a family named Broomfield that at some point owned land on the west side of the Saco River, and Reverend Tracy married a Broomfield. So, and that is total speculation, 100% unverified information. But, in my mind, I was making this leap of, maybe this is why he had this great land that right next to the Saco River. I don't know.
They could certainly be. I mean, that is one of those things you discover, the things you discover when you start doing this kind of research, for
Yeah,
sure.
it could, but we'll talk a little bit about like how people, I would say, I'm one of those people, I would have tried to make that leap and, maybe done some research to figure out if that connection was there, but we'll talk a little bit about like, verifying information in a minute. So we can, do you think that covers all the deed stuff?
I think so. I mean, it's basically, yeah, like knowing there are these two main places, 2 or 3 main places where you're going to go to look for that stuff: the city, the county, and then if you have a very, very old home, you can go to the York County deed books, which are either in the library or at Family Search. So I think that's awesome.
Okay, so historic designations.
Yeah. And so Biddeford definitely has a number of properties on the National Register of Historic Places. And actually, if you either want to show it, if you want to pull up Biddeford history, I can just show people very quickly like how they can search those and pull them up.
Again,
Yeah, because if you scroll down just a little bit on the page, you'll see the Biddeford, a National Register story map. And if you click on that, that will open up this map. And basically what we've done here is we've entered all of the buildings that are on the National Register, and you can use this to click around. They're mostly in the downtown area, but yep, if you scroll on up, every place where you see a push pin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so all of the push pins are let's see, all of the push pins are either so there's the Main Street Historic District, and there's the Mills Historic District, as well as a few like one-off like individual buildings. The individual buildings are the ones that are the green squares with the pink push pins. So this one that we're floating over right now says Fleet Bank NC. So that means that that building is a non-contributing building. It's within the district, but it's not part of the district because it's like had too much work done, like it's too new. But just below it in the green square with the pink push pin, so that's City Hall. And that is, it's part of the Main Street Historic District. It's also by itself. So if you kind of hover on the pink push pin just below the green one, then it pulls up, yep, that's also an individual building. So that gives you the individual information. And there's a few of those. I think City Hall, the Federal Building, which was the old post office. Those are part of Main Street, but they're also individual buildings as well. So you can use this map to go through all of the buildings and that are on the National Register and see like which building is which is really nice, especially for the mill buildings, because those can be really complicated. Some of the buildings aren't there anymore, but and there's the MacArthur Library. So this is just a way to tour all of Biddeford's National Register places. And so you can see whether or not your building is part of that. It's mostly not residences, but there are a couple in there. So that's the National Register, if you're interested in it.
Okay, I'm just gonna pop into this since I've got it right on the screen. So we talked a little bit about this too when we were prepping for this, but it's also a good idea to look at what's happening in the state in terms of historic preservation. Maine Historic Preservation Commission and some of I think there's some national sites as well. They often have great preservation guides. If you're in a historic home or building and you want to try to keep it the way that it has been or restore it to where it should have been, then this is the kind of information that is very helpful. The other thing is that there's some work being done on identifying what was happening prehistory, like pre-white people history, for lack of a better term. But your location may be historically significant as an indigenous community, or, you know, there may have been land use that was happening prior to the mills and the city and all this other stuff. Like, we know that Biddeford Pool is a very, very historically significant area for indigenous peoples. And so looking at some of these preservation commissions and some of the prehistory stuff is to me something that you really should be doing as well when you're looking at the history of your home.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so we just wanted to keep, you know, put that out there as well.
That's great.
Let's see. So, okay, so historic designations. Oh, okay. So who lived there?
And we kind of talked about this already a little bit, because we were talking about city directories and like the pictures and the local history books that talk about the people and where they lived. So those are definitely, like, all of those things that Melanie talked about, like at the very beginning of our discussion, are, you know, that's that genealogy of a home, is really like all of those things.
I'm going to pull up my little notes here, because I remember years and years and years ago somebody telling me that there are different ways to go about genealogy. There are people that just want to list the name and then move on. They don't want to fill in the meat and potatoes. They don't want that information. But we looked at it a different way. We thought, okay, well, so who was Reverend Tracy? Like, how much information? So I dug around, and this included like a lot of different kinds of searching, trying to figure out where Reverend Tracy came from. There's really not a lot in Ancestry, which Ancestry is usually great because you can, you know, you can often tap into a family tree and then just verify the information, kind of dig around and find it. So Reverend Tracy came here and was well liked. They wanted him to continue to be a minister while he was here. So I went through to fill in some of the gaps. I went to our vital records and found that Reverend Tracy was here for like 4 or 5 years. During that time, he got engaged in Biddeford to a woman, I think it was Abigail or Ann Broomfield. And then with a little more digging, I found out that they actually got married in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And so, okay, so there's a piece of the information. They were here, but then they sort of left. And then digging around online, I actually found a history of the church itself, the UCC church, that says in 1826, there was a split with the Second Congregational Church in Biddeford. Many of the members and Reverend Tracy moved to Second Parish Unitarian in Saco. So then a couple years later, the Second Parish Unitarian Church Meeting House dedicated, and Reverend Tracy was installed as a minister. So one of the little cool things was that in Renee's amazing archives, we actually have the sermon where he was ordained by another person, and this is when he was ordained. So another little glimmer of Reverend Tracy. So then in 1828, the UUCSB timeline says Reverend Tracy leaves because the congregation is unable to pay his salary. The church is served by interims and supply ministers until 1843. So now another little piece, like, we know that he was ordained in the area. And then if you look at the vital records, he actually performed a lot of weddings and funerals and different things like that. So we know he was here, we know where he lived, and then he left, and from all accounts, he spent his time right in the center of Newburyport, in this sort of beautiful little area of the city beyond that. So if you're looking for those meat and potato things, there's several different avenues. You've got the vital records, you've got Ancestry, and all the other things that have to do with genealogy.
And then if it's early enough, the local newspapers are amazing. And oftentimes, like in the earlier papers, they'll say, like, Joe Smith of Foss Street or whatever. So you can kind of do a search by street, or if you come up with a person's name, you can search their name in the newspapers, and that will give you a lot of juicy information often. Especially like if you've got turn of the century, because we had, you know, 3 or 4 different daily and weekly newspapers going, that was just like, I mean, there's a lot of information about people and what they were doing and what was going on, and it's they're just freely available to search and download and share. So
And now that we've scanned and digitized things, it does make it a lot easier to search. You know,
yeah,
it really does, unless you have a very specific date, and you know, sometimes it's a lot of historical digging.
yeah,
And so I also looked at George Gibbs, and it was kind of interesting. Like, so the things that I looked at the city directories, which, you know, we talked a little bit about, obviously places him in the location of Stone Street for a
Yeah.
long time. We also have a lot of the mill records. So if you're doing, and Renee can talk about that more, but I'm sure that if you really wanted to find more about George K. Gibbs, you could find things in the mill records as well.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, we have like in the at the local, at the genealogy and local history site, we do have finding aids are all online there, and you can also find those in the library's catalog. So there's a finding aid for our mill collection, and then I mean, there's also the Mills Museum has pretty extensive collections, and they have a lot of oral histories as well. Although you know, Gibb is, I think, like way earlier, so but he would be in a lot of like the books and ledgers and stuff like that. And I think he actually shows up in, we have a lot of like histories of the mills that were written in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, and I think he shows up in those, especially the ones from the 50s and 60s.
It's interesting too. Again, one of the city directories I was looking at for something, and not related to this, but in one of the city directories, it actually listed all the people that worked in the mill.
Oh yeah, one of the early ones.
Yeah,
was,
every once in a while you find these, and they don't carry them off in every single city directory. So you may find it in, you know, in one city directory that you do the next year, they do not do that. And so they're always just so amazing to me that there's this wealth of information.
Yeah, and for Gibbs is someone that you would find a lot in the newspaper, because he would be mentioned all the time in whatever was going on there. So that's an interesting one for that resource as well, for sure.
Yeah, and the newspapers, even if you just want to look at them, they're fun.
Yeah, they're really fun.
They really
The
are
ads and stuff like that, they give you a great taste of life, like a snapshot of you know, what was going on and what people did in their off time, and it's really neat. So you can certainly find a lot there.
And then the other thing that I found in Ancestry, another thing, is the census records. And it was interesting. Like, I was looking at the census and I was trying to figure out, like, so apparently in some of the older census records, they said, like, this is house number 1 and here's who's living here. Here's house number 2. And I was trying to figure out, where is the list of the houses that were just like 1, 2, 3, 4, because this particular house was like number 508. And anyway, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
And I mean, it's actually really, the census is awesome, because you can see, you know, if there were like multiple, you know, if you have multi-generational groups living in a house, or you can really, that's where you can really see that, you know, you'll see, and I've seen this for other research, not for this particular one, but you know, you'll have multiple generations living under one roof, that, you know, that doesn't necessarily show up in the directory, that that this was like a family home with a lot of different people in it, or if there were boarders, if they kept boarders there, if they rented a room, or perhaps there was you know, housekeeper or other live-in help, which is really fascinating. And so the census record is just really fantastic for, you know, especially like seeing, like, you know, you really see like how many people maybe lived in a home, like whether it was like one person or 10 people, and it might be, sometimes it might surprise you who was there.
It's especially since we were such a big mill town. When
Mhm.
you start getting into like the 1860s, 70s, you'll see like border with a widow with like 10 people living in the home
Yeah,
that are completely unrelated. There's not a
yeah,
relationship there. They're all borders. And it does give you some insight to how connections are often made.
yeah. It's awesome. The census is an awesome resource for that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely well worth the look.
Yeah. And this is I mean, obviously this stuff is going to vary depending on which house you're looking at.
Yeah,
Like we have some pretty significant, we have a minister and a mill, a
yeah,
foreman or an
yeah,
important person in the mill. So then later on, and this was something that I found actually in the deeds, was that this was a funeral home,
yeah,
Sansucci Blaze Funeral Home. And again, like I couldn't dig that far back. Like I think I hit the end of the deeds that are recorded online. So I think my next step would have been to go to the Registry of Deeds to figure this out. But the interesting thing is that one of the people affiliated during that time, actually, it looks like Pepperell Mills gave them a mortgage.
Oh, wow.
And it shows that like I think they owned like some beach property as well. And so one of the mortgages was to the beach property and one was for the home. But it was kind of interesting to see that. So, it's not like it was 70, 80 years ago. Things were very different than they are now in terms of the way that we approach getting a mortgage.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you worked for the mill or if you had some affiliation, and it makes me wonder whether this mill had been this home had been in the mill family, somebody affiliated with the mill, and then said, okay, well, we'll get you a mortgage through the mill, and then you do this,
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but it was sort of an interesting tie back to Pepperell.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool, and like this part of like our last piece that we wanted to talk about, it kind of like flows into that really well, where when you're doing this kind of research, like sometimes things are going to come up that maybe don't make sense, or like they don't, you'll find information resources at a few different places and they're not the same, like they don't agree. And that is the really tricky part of this kind of thing, or any kind of historical research, is what do you do when things don't add up? How do you figure that out? And that's why I kind of tend to be in the business of like, I don't guarantee everything I hand over to you. I just hand over to you like all the information that I can find, and then I'll let you kind of decide where you want to go with it, like what you think is correct and what is maybe like got signals crossed.
Yeah, because we find this kind of stuff all the time, especially I think it's very, very common in genealogy. And actually Mr. Gibbs is a perfect example, is that in the translation of the records, George K. Gibbs was George R. Gibbs, George H. Gibbs, George K. Gibbs. And often if that's caught, they'll put it in parentheses, like, maybe this wasn't translated right. Some of the census, especially the early census records, are really hard to read. And you're kind of speculating, like, is this the same person? Who is this? And is this the same person? So we just recommend that you verify as much of the information as you can.
Yeah, and to definitely, go into things with an open mind, say, well, you gather up as much information as you can, make sure you write down where you found it. So if you need to go back to it, you can. And, it's just gathering as much info and kind of following the leads where they take you to try and figure out, okay, so here we have, one person saying this thing and another resource is saying this thing, and you know figuring out which is which.
Yeah,
It's not always easy.
and another caveat is that in Maine, 1947 fires happened and a lot of stuff was lost.
Yeah.
And you're going to see varying information from town to town in terms of what, like we're very fortunate that Biddeford has been dedicated to preserving its history from the beginning. And we're very, very lucky that Robert MacArthur had the foresight to make sure that this historic building was preserved and that, it's really kind of served as this. And then, of course, it took Renee to come in and organize it so we can actually find it.
But then again, you still have, like, I know that there were fires in the past that, like, there were some records that have been destroyed, like, when the city building burned in 1894. I don't know how much went up with that. But I mean, like, you do have times where things just aren't there, and like you're not always going to be able to find the answer that you're looking for. So then that's when you just go and get as much information as you can get and say, okay, here's all the information I could gather. Like, I personally, I tend to just include everything. I tend to say, well, I don't have the solid answer. This is what I know. This is what I know. This is what I know. And leave it at that. But not everyone is okay with that. Never.
So yeah, sometimes there's not a perfect answer.
Yeah.
But like it was our goal today to make you feel a little more comfortable coming to the library, knowing what resources we can offer you online, and then where you're really going to have to do some digging. As always, you're more than welcome to come to the building and visit the librarians and ask us questions, and we will try to help you with whatever research you're doing.
Yeah. Or if you send us an email, just give us as much information as you can. Let us know what you're trying to do, and we'll definitely do our best to help you figure it out and do what we can for you. Like that's what we do.
And it's fun. It makes it, it breaks up our day when we get a really interesting question.
Yeah, we all kind of end up getting in on it because it's when we have a real juicy research thing that we're trying to figure out. Everyone wants to help. Everyone's like, oh wow, that's a really good question.
And we really did a couple of weeks ago that the haunting one. I actually love those questions. Yeah. Because it is interesting, but I could not find a crime that happened in that house. Like it was just not going to happen.
and that's okay. If you're me, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I just don't have the answer to that. That's all right.
But I think we literally, I think every single one of our reference librarians worked on that from a different avenue. And it shows the beauty of research because we all approached it in a very slightly different way to try to find the information. So it makes it kind of fun.
Well, we hope that everyone enjoyed this video. We hope it helped you get started or feel like you can start. And like Melanie said, just if you have questions, definitely reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we hope everyone has a great day and keep on enjoying Family History Month.